I was at my friend's house for a sleepover when we decided to go out for a walk around the neighborhood before midnight. And to break the boredom, we decided to play the Ding Dong Ditch game. And if you're not familiar with it, it's simply when you ring on doors and run away. A childish but an enjoyable prank. We marked our targeted house, and in no time we were ringing on the door like crazy and started running away just in time. In few seconds the door was opened, and there was one of the creepiest men we've ever saw. We started to walk away instantly, but he came out right after us and kept following us with his phone camera pointed at our backs. So we started to walk even faster to get away from him as much as we could, but this freak just kept sprinting to catch up on us. So we ran right back home. And yes, I know this was pretty stupid move of us. But anyways, once we were there, he came up to the front door, knocked it on few times, and shouted at us if we liked how he's banging at the door and how we enjoyed the annoying he caused. Then he simply left. It's been a year and we didn't see him again. Back then, it was one of my scariest moments of my life. But now, when we remember that day, it was kinda funny. It was a dark and stormy night. I was sitting at home, trying to pass the time by watching some Netflix shows. The wind was howling outside, and the rain was beating against the windows, making it feel as though the world was coming to an end. Suddenly, I heard a knock at the backyard glass door. I froze, wondering who could possibly be out in such terrible weather. I hesitated for a moment, then slowly made my way to the door. As I approached, I smelled a weird rotting smell in the air. And when I was in front of the glass door, I peeked through the glass on the backyard, and to my shock, I saw a weird figure standing on the other side, and due to the weather conditions, it took me few seconds to realize that it was a young girl, no more than 10 years old, with long, flowing white hair and a pale, gaunt face. She wore an old-fashioned dress, and her eyes were dark and empty. I felt a wave of fear wash over me, and I stepped back, not wanting to attract the attention of her. Something does not seem right. But as I turned around to get back upstairs and lock myself in, the girl reached out and touched the window, as if she was trying to communicate with me. I watched in horror as she slowly vanished, disappearing into the door as if it were some sort of portal to another world. I stood there, frozen in place, my heart racing with fear and confusion. I had no idea what to do, or what this all meant. All I knew was that I had just seen a ghost, and that I was terrified. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my bed, too scared to sleep or even move. And when the dawn broke and the storm had passed, I knew that I would never be the same again. I had seen a ghost, a real fucking ghost. I remember when I was around the age of 12, my family and I lived in a small apartment on the 7th floor, which in fact was pretty damn high for a kid with acrophobia. And since our building was full of red flags, like drug addicts and all sorts of criminals, I was not allowed to go out or get in touch or play with any of the other kids in the building. One night, after my mother turned off the lights for bedtime, the whole family went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night, around 2 a.m. I was pretty thirsty, so I was going to grab a cup of water from the kitchen. But as I was pulling off my blanket, I heard noises coming from the other side of the house. Being a stupid kid, I didn't think anything of it. So I got up and walked out of my room. The moon was lighting up the room through the open sliding door to the balcony. But then I came to the terrifying realization that the sliding door was supposed to be closed. I knew this because I was the one who closed it before bed. But at that moment I heard those noises again, and they were coming from the kitchen. I realized that someone might actually be in the home. I tried tiptoeing to my parents' room, but I looked behind me, and what I saw scared me to death. It was a man. a man in a costume. He looked at me and started laughing. Then he tried pulling me towards him, but I broke out of his grip and ran to my mother's room. I was too scared to say anything. The next morning I told my mother everything, but she told me it was all just a wild nightmare. I tried to tell my dad, but he said the same. Only me know what happened, but no one believes me. I will never forget that shit he wore over his head. I'm in my mid-20s now, and till this very day, I never get out of bed at night, for any reason, no matter what. About 6 years ago, my parents had to go off town to attend their old friend's wedding, and I was left behind with my big cousin James. They trusted him enough to watch over me, as I was just 12 at the time. That night, he and I were playing games, when there was a sudden loud sound of scratching at the door. James calmly stood up and walked towards the door, to investigate the source of this noisy scratching. Then he suddenly looked at me, and with a scratchy, scared voice he told me to get to my bedroom upstairs. It was only around 7 p.m., but it was dark and he insisted that it was my bedtime. He tucked me into my bed and went back downstairs again. And since both of my parents were hunters, they had a handful of guns in a glass cabinet downstairs. And I could tell that when James went downstairs again, he went to grab one of the guns. Few seconds later, I started to hear loud shuffling outside in the leaves. I called for him to come upstairs. He was up and next to my bed in less than a second, with a gun in hand. I told him about what I was hearing outside and how I was scared. He looked outside and said there wasn't anything to be scared of. By then, the scratching and kicking at the door had stopped, but I was still scared as fuck. But James decided to stay in my room and assured me that everything will be all right. And within few minutes, I fell asleep. So did he. And at around midnight, the shuffling started again. I immediately started to cry, and that woke James up really fast. He got up and walked out of the room and stood at the top of the stairs. Seconds later, I heard him shoot something with a loud scream, and he was running back to the room right after. A minute or so later, there was scratching at the bedroom door again. James grabbed his phone and called the police immediately. The scratching continued. And honestly, it seemed like forever till the police arrived, even though it was less than 5 minutes. And once the police sirens were here, the scratching sound disappeared instantly. I don't remember much from what happened that day than what I've told you. And James strictly refused to talk about that day, no matter how hard I tried to make him talk. I guess I'll just never know what James saw that day.